excellent. I appreciate the call and response there. So we're going to have fun. We're going to get digging deeply into the role of the Chief People Officer. We're going to talk about the role of HR and how that's been evolving over the last several years. We're going to talk about the career path of a CPO, and we're going to go deep on some interesting topics. But before we get started, we actually want to get a little bit better understanding of all of you. So first off, if you are currently in a recruiting-focused role, raise your hand. So all recruiter, you're a recruiter, basically. Okay, hands down. If you are in an HR role that is not directly recruiting for people, raise your hand. Okay, good mix. All right, if you are an individual contributor, raise your hand. And if you're a manager, raise your hand. Okay, good. This is like a very broad mix of attendees, so I think we're gonna have some fun. So let's dig in. You've seen we have our bio slide that was up before, so you know about our roles, our organizations. I'd like to just quickly, starting with you, Susan, kind of go down the room and say a little bit about your organization, and then share what originally drew you to HR.
Great. I have to admit, these chairs are not made for short people, so I'll try to not hunch over. Hi, my name is Susan Lee. I'm the head of people at Warby Parker. Warby Parker is a transformational lifestyle brand, but in a nutshell, we make glasses and have seen some really incredible growth over the last few years. We're 8 years old. We are just under 1,500 people with 66 stores and continuing to open and scaling quickly. What drew me to HR, so fun fact, I used to be a network engineer, and actually I started my career as an admin assistant, so I am an example of you don't have to have a linear career, but I worked in a job as a network engineer where I hated waking up every morning and going to work. I literally thought every day, do I still have any PTO time so I can call out, or just what can I do not to go to work? And eventually, I thought I am willing to start my career over if I can find a job in which I didn't hate to go to every day. And so back in the day, Craigslist was where you looked, and I went on Craigslist, found an HR coordinator job for a surf clothing company called Hurley International. I lived in Orange County. So I became the HR admin. I worked as a bartender at Dave & Buster's at the same time to make ends meet. And that is my illustrious beginning into HR.
Ginger?
Great. Hi, it's great to be with you. Ginger Hardage, and I'm founder. My company is Unstoppable Cultures, and I retired recently from Southwest Airlines, where I was Senior Vice President of Culture and Communications. And I know this is I'm gonna tell you how long I was there, and you're all gonna go, oh, 25 years. So it was a great career and wonderful time at Southwest Airlines. So, and I don't have a strict HR background. I'm a bit of a chameleon. I led the best practices, best place to work initiatives for Southwest. So I got to work with all of our recruiting folks, diversity and inclusion, but I led the culture and communications, had a team of about 150 folks who worked on those types of projects. And I was drawn to this field because the business of business is people. And really understanding that a company's true character is expressed by its people. So I have a real passion around the aspect of helping organizations be in the best possible place they can be from the people they bring into their companies. So that's my story.
Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Steinberg, and I am the Chief People Officer at Zenefits. And Zenefits is going through a transformation. I'm sure many of you have heard about kind of the trials and tribulations of Zenefits, and I'm there to try to transform the company, which we're doing. What Zenefits does, it's a people platform that makes all the day-to-day HR tasks easier and better. My career started a little bit different than Ginger or Susan. My whole career wanted to be a clinical psychologist. and was getting my master's in clinical psychology while I was working at Nordstrom. And I realized over time that I really wanted to apply those same concepts in more of a business instead of a clinical setting. So I decided to take the chance, and I'd been with Nordstrom for a couple of years and moved from San Diego to Illinois, Chicago, Illinois in December, which was probably not the greatest decision I ever made, but it was a great decision to go in and be in HR for Nordstrom. That was my first job, and literally hired and trained thousands of people to open their first store in the Midwest. So that's how I started. Now I've worked for a number of both Fortune 500 companies and startup companies as well. Startup companies are really my passion, helping companies think through scale in a graceful way. And I think there's a lot of change that's happening in the field, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Great. And so one of the things that I'm kind of curious is the role of HR has been evolving really dramatically. I mean, we've kind of gone from human resources to business partners to people operations. We've been evolving both kind of the skill set and responsibilities, and I think the expectations that our organizations have for what the role of HR means and what the role of a chief people officer is. So I'm curious to get kind of all of your take is how do you define the role of the chief people officer today, and how do you see that perhaps differing from even 5 years ago?
Yeah, so what's funny is I actually tell my staff quite frequently that I'm neither your therapist nor your mother, because I feel like that's how sometimes they want us to behave, or what they believe that's what they're supposed to be getting out of the people function. So for me, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and there used to be a template to how to do HR. It's like there's great systems in the back, you do X, Y, Z, you get these 20% year over year, you've got to figure out how to do salary increases, you have to figure out how to make a budget to hire, and it was really the basics of how we did the work, and also don't get sued. I mean, that was pretty much our job. But today, it's like there are so many nuances to people, and it is a crazy time and an amazing time where people are finding their voices, and they're insisting on being treated fairly and having equal opportunity. And we haven't, which I'm very thankful for, we haven't just thrown a new program at people. Like back in the day when people wanted to have a voice and wanted opportunity, we threw affirmative action out there. But that's not how we're approaching it anymore. Now it's more of a job of listening, I think, more than anything, and appreciating different perspectives. And the job of the chief people officer then is to kind of meld all those voices and perspectives together to create a singular kind of response that's going to make sense for the business and for the people supporting the business. So to me, it feels like almost like a game of Tetris, where people are just falling down in different shapes, and I have to figure out how to flip those shapes so that they fit together. And I love that because it is both strategic, but it's also heavily involved in giving people what they need and want to be successful in their careers.
Okay. Great, and Ginger, I know this question for you, obviously you come from a non-traditional path outside of HR, but you've worked with CPOs, you've seen the role of how HR has been evolving and how it's actually created opportunities for roles like yours in organizations. What's your take on kind of how the role of the chief people officer exists today and how that differs from the past?
Well, I have to agree with Susan. It's become much more collaborative and much more totally across the enterprise. So even though HR might not be doing all of the functions, it's heavily involved, obviously, starting with recruiting, onboarding. I think so much more time is spent on onboarding than ever was before. In fact, I'll just pause right there. My very first job right out of college was with a life insurance company, and I showed up, and I could tell everybody was it was a small company. I could tell everybody was a little nervous, not really knowing what to do with me, and it took me several hours to figure out the person who had hired me had been fired. And so when I think back to bad onboarding, there was no very little, it was a small company, there was very little paper trail. Luckily, it worked out. I worked there for 3 years. So I'll just pause about the importance of onboarding and getting that done correctly. And setting that right tone. I know one of the things when employees first come in, every Monday, new employees come in to Southwest Airlines to the training center, and everybody's greeted with cheering and high fives, and their training process begins. So I'll put in that plug for onboarding. But back to the original question, it's just that creating that web that will support the entire life cycle of an employee, all the way from the active benefits, making that as easy and simple and turnkey for employees as possible, all the training and talent development, whether that be leadership or specific jobs, being involved in that. As well as organizational design. More and more HR professionals are involved in organizational design. And then the passion that I have is around culture and working together regardless of what your title is. Because I really believe culture is everyone's job. It starts at the top, heavy influence from HR professionals. But every employee, culture is part of their job as well. So I think HR is in a great place where you can put your nose in everybody's business and have a real impact about how your organization is viewed inside and outside.
Okay.
Great.
Beth?
I think the biggest change that I've seen is the function moving from really being a reactive function where issues would come in or problems would come in or things would happen and you would react to those things. And I really see the function of moving to a much more proactive function where you are getting ahead of what's happening in the business. You understand the needs of the business as a partner to that business, and your role is to help drive business results through putting in the right programs, getting the right people, setting up leaders to be successful. So I see it completely change from when I first started in HR, I would say 20 plus years ago. And I'm definitely more optimistic about the field than I have ever been. I think there are so many interesting career tracks in HR that didn't used to exist. And I actually don't like to call it HR. I think it's a little old schooly way to call the function. But now I see that the people on my team are viewed as strategic partners to the business, and they're brought into every conversation. And it's no longer, what Patty McCord said, you no longer have to aspire to have a seat at the table or use those terms because it's just expected that you are going to have a seat at the table, and you need to match that. You need to be able to drive the strategy of the business in a way that you are having, great results for the business. So I see that completely change from being kind of an administrative reactive function to a strategic proactive function.
Great. And I'm glad you picked up on that, because I think a lot of people, when you look at HR departments today, there's this legacy that we're trying to that we're trying to kind of shed, which is transactional, personnel, right? Reactive, responding to things, compliance-driven, and the nature of the function is becoming more strategic. So I'm curious, from your points of view, what does best-in-class kind of people operations or HR look like today?
So for Warby, it's pretty unique. I came from Spotify before I went to Warby, and Spotify really had to look at things from a holistic global point of view. So we had at the time over 58 countries, And it was really important to be a little bit more systematic about how we approached things. At Warby, our entire culture is built on innovation. I mean, we basically created this company to solve a problem for overpriced glasses. And in 2015, we were recognized by Fast Company as the most innovative company in the world. And that's beyond the Apples and the Googles of the world. So there's this eyeglass company that's considered innovative. And the truth is that is absolutely in our DNA. So how we approach people at Warby is not, it's not traditional. Yes, we're verticalized in like recruiting and employee experience and learning and development, but everyone participates in talent projects. So if it's something that's going to impact the company, everyone has a voice on this talent team about how we want to approach it. We're also, in the past, it used to be like you only have one chance to make a great first impression. That's how I used to approach HR. So everything needs to be buttoned up, tested. You have to think about all the questions ahead of time. Well, at Warby, we are very much a testing culture. We pilot things. We are ready to make mistakes. We ask people, let's try this new performance management tool or this new applicant tracking system, this new hiring plan. And if it works, let's get the feedback from the managers and then let's roll it out as a company. So we really approach things as a testing culture, and I think that this just allows us to push the boundaries, which has actually made this talent and people function super fun. I'll just give one quick example. So we launched a spring collection of glasses, and when it was presented to us by the merchandising team and the product team, they said these are the hot shades in fashion today. They are the nude tones, the blush tones, and the skin tones. And they brought up all these pinks and beige colors. And we got numerous emails from our retail staff across the country to me, the head of people, saying, I just took offense to that because that's not actually my skin tone. That's not what I think of as blush or nude. And we took that feedback from our employees, retail advisors. We took it to the head of merchandising and the CEO, and we changed the name right then and there. So I just think what's interesting today in people and talent is that we're able to move quicker and we're open to not just dig our heels in the ground just to make a statement. We're really trying now to do what makes sense for people in the business, and I think that's a really refreshing time for us.
Great. Ginger?
Yeah, I think the trend I'm seeing in best in class is being an employer brand at every touch point. Because you're not looking at recruiting people just through your website or when they're applying for a job. You might be recruiting them 2 years ahead of time when they experience your product and start to like it. And every touch point that a potential candidate or any customer has with your product, that's recruiting because they're getting a glimpse of what your organization is like. So the way a company behaves on the inside is going to find its way to the outside. And so I think that's what best in class companies are looking for, is that seamless approach where what you see on the outside mirrors exactly what you would experience on the inside of that organization. So best in class is collaborating with all aspects of the business. It's collaborating with marketing to make sure that are employees being used in the advertising? How do our employees show up online? Employees are being trained at how to be the ambassadors for the company, representing the company in all their online channels. They're challenged to go out in the community and represent you when they're in their favorite volunteer program. So I think best in class is making sure every touch point, not just when you're inside your company building or at your company location, every touch point is part of recruiting in the long term.
I see a couple things that I think are great. I see kind of the melding of the talent and the people, or the recruiting and people functions together. At Zenefits, we are one team. We behave as one team because, obviously from the first time you reach out to a candidate to the time that they, leave the company or get promoted. Those should all be seamless in the way that it's done and a great experience. So I like putting talent and people together and working together and sharing the same information with everybody and really being one team aligned with the business. The other thing that I see happening is trying to make sure that you are teaching leaders how to lead. I feel like I've failed if everybody needs to come to me to manage their people. That you have not built a scalable organization if that's the case. And I think that's something that's changing. I think oftentimes in HR, people have felt like, I want people to come to me and I want to coach them and guide them. And I think that's partly true, but you also need to make sure that you are figuring out how you get your company to scale. And you're not going to grow your people and talent team, in an infinite way. You need to make sure that you're passing on all the great things about how you hire people, how you onboard people, how you lead people, how you give feedback to the leaders in the organization and not just hold that in your own department. And I think it makes a huge difference in your ability to actually scale a company.
I just have to underscore that because that's one of the things in surveying that comes back from so many different companies is that lack of support to mid-level managers.
Yeah.
And because when employees are responding about how they feel about the company, about the leadership of the company, they are generally not talking about the CEO. They're thinking about their leader. And it's critical, the amount, and that's a real void in a lot of organizations is how much support, and because our mid-level managers are some of the busiest people in the company.
And their highest leverage point too.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, and I say this all the time, is I don't necessarily need 500 people to be bonded to me. It's kind of a failure of the system if if employees feel like they're the person who recruited them or their HR business partner, is the only person that they have in the organization. The company's failed then. They really need to be bonded to their leaders and their teams and not to the HR organization.
I want to talk a little about the role of HR has been in the news quite a bit lately with the growing kind of conversation around the Me Too movement, employees feeling more empowered to share their voices externally, good or bad. What is the role of HR in kind of helping their organizations navigate through? Because I think a lot of times when you read the press, where was HR? Where was HR at Uber? Where was HR at Nike? Where was HR, name the scandal? And I think people don't necessarily have an understanding of what HR is actually doing and what they've done behind the scenes. So take us inside of that. What does that look like for a CPO in an HR department?
Yeah, so truth be told, some HR people do suck. I mean, it's the truth. So I think at some of these companies, they really effed up and they failed. And you're sometimes caught in a really difficult situation. I have had CEOs where I've had to tell them, this guy is a jerk, and he is problematic, or she is a bully. And then I have had that exact same Uber response. Well, it's a really good worker. They're very valuable. So it is a sucky position to be in sometimes. But I think where where you cross that line into a real strategic partner is you don't let that answer be the last word. It's got to be, and you appeal to whatever. You shame your CEO, or you tell them we're gonna look really bad in the press, or this is wrong for our employees. You do what you need to do. I think we're a lot feistier and scrappier than we've been in the past. We used to be very polite. But that's just, I think the role now has become, you've got to be a fighter for the business, for the company, for the employees. I think the other thing that's really important is that in the past, heads of HR and just HR, the function, and most companies as a whole, activate out of fear. I'm afraid to be sued. I'm afraid to do something wrong. I'm afraid to be looked at as a company that doesn't have a strong culture. And that's just got to flip. It's got to be, it's like, you can't do things like start an employee resource group for women because I'm responding to Me Too. You've got to do it because you believe the women in your company need to have a voice. So instead of behaving, and you talked about this before, we used to be very reactionary, but now instead of thinking about letting fear be the driver of how we work, it's got to be almost like a boldness of, I believe this to be right and true. And I'll just give you an example. One of our managers came to me and she said, I've been really worried about, or just been really aware about diversity and inclusion, obviously a big topic right now. And she said, so I have people who are people of color on my team. We're all foodies. And I wanted to ask them if they knew where the best Chinese restaurants were, but I was worried that they were going to be offended. And I said, well, that's your problem. If you're worried they're going to be offended, that's the problem. I would be worried if I'm saying something offensive. And it's a little bit of a difference, but you can't not, I mean, in a group of 500 people, any one person could be offended by anything you say. I might say, I love the Yankees, and all the Mets fans are like, you suck, you know, and you just don't know who you're going to offend. So instead of worrying about who you're going to offend, I would actually be looking and thinking, am I being offensive, whether it's my intention, my words. So I just think that's kind of the shift that's happening right now in leadership for people and talent.
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject, both acting with courage and the Me Too movement that are near and dear to me. When I first started out in HR, I had a very difficult situation with the CFO of a company, and I spoke with somebody who'd been a mentor, and she said to me, "This is a time where you've got to be willing to throw your badge across the table," meaning like, you're going to have to address this, but you may have to quit. And it was something, this was years ago, but it stuck with me over the years because I think, while I have been in the same situation where you tried to address something and didn't get traction, through the years, and it takes time, I've found my voice, and like Madeline Auerbach said, now that I've found it, I plan on using it, and so yeah, I do think we have a responsibility to stand up for what's right in our organizations. That can be a very difficult thing to do, and I think that's what people don't necessarily understand. We're doing something pretty innovative at Zenefits around it right now, around just kind of the Me Too, harassment, discrimination in the workplace. We hadn't had many issues since I've been there, or any issues since I've been there, but I felt like since we weren't addressing it proactively, I wasn't really sure. So I decided to just have an open roundtable, an open discussion around harassment in the workforce. I invited the entire San Francisco office. About 50 people showed up, half men, half women. And I basically said, I don't want to hide behind what's going on externally. I don't think there are things going on internally, but I want to have that dialogue. And we went around and everyone said, why am I here? And there were many men who said, I have daughters. I don't ever want anything like this to happen to them. And it became an exceedingly useful discussion. And what came out of the discussion was that most people had never either witnessed harassment or discrimination or been a victim to it, so they really were not sure how they would react. And so what we are now doing are doing practice sessions around situations that you may see at work or outside of work. So we have, essentially flashcards that have situations like you hear somebody call somebody by a racially charged name in the lunch area. What do you do? And we have people role play. And it's been pretty amazing to see how that has transformed just the dialogue within the organization and the confidence of our employees in being able to address things themselves when they are not full-blown harassment, but they may be things that are offensive. So I think, obviously this is something that in HR and in talent you're responsible for, and you have to take it very seriously.
I was just going to add, 5 years ago, this would not have happened.
For sure.
So 5 years ago, leaders would say, why are you inviting this conversation? You're basically asking people to maybe come forward when they don't really think it. You're inviting trouble. And that's when we're talking about the changing face of the talent and people function is now we're the drivers of that conversation so that we can even prepare people for when something can happen. And that's why when I'm saying that it's kind of an exciting shift in company culture, that's just a clear example of that.
I agree.
And the only addition I would have would be to make sure that your senior leaders are there when those conversations are taking place, so they're active participants and don't feel that they are excluded from the conversation or shouldn't be held accountable. It's important that those senior leaders be there and model that kind of behavior, that they're all part of the learning and sharing as well.
And I'm curious, for the audience, how many of you are planning on making a pitch to your boss for investment in either new technology or to pilot a new initiative, to try something different in your organization this year? Hands up. Okay, so these are your people. They're coming to you. They want your support. They want to influence you. They want to convince you to allow them to invest or adopt or try something new. What's the best way for them to approach, their CPO, their leader, their boss to get buy-in for the project?
I laugh because they are literally my people sitting right there, raising their hands.
Bonus points for you. You're going to have immediate takeaways for this.
I'm like, yes, they are my people. Again, changing face of what we're doing in talent and people is, in the past, ours was the first budget to get cut. It was the role of the head person to kind of really make this business case and beg and plead and also prioritize what, training cut because I want to have an HRIS system or an ATS, or we can use Excel spreadsheets for this year because I want to do this. And it was a lot. I'm not saying that the pocketbooks have opened up. They have not by any means, but I think that talent people are getting better at making the business case, putting data behind it. Data was not something that was ever attached to HR when I was growing up in this business. So it has become a big thing. My team, none of us are analysts, but all of us know they have to start tracking. They have to use Greenhouse to look at where our candidates are coming from. If we're finding holes, I tell them, go and find something. Find something. This is the budget you have for recruiting as a whole. If you guys decide this is going to be a priority, make your business case. Tell me what the objective is. Where are we failing? How is this test going to work? Show me data that shows me that it's working, and then we'll move forward. So I think also just some exciting times for all of you guys is you're getting, I'm hoping, and you should be getting more of this responsibility where you may not have in years past. And so I think the great part too is I just throw them off the deep end and say, go and try. And it's scary, but that's also for the type of person that loves that. They're gonna thrive in at least trying to do the research, putting together the business case, putting metrics against it, and that's only gonna make you better in whatever job you move forward into.
Yeah. I'd just add to all that, yes, and build a coalition outside of human resources who would support your business case. So go talk to departments who might benefit from this, the departments who might benefit from the most. Really line up your allies. Bring in endorsements. There's nothing, you can bring in testimonials and endorsements as part of your business plan and talk about what difference it's going to make. So do more coalition building before you come in and present the business plan, obviously with all the metrics and intended outcomes, but build your case and your core of support.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I mean, obviously I like to look at data before I make decisions and want to know, so what, why does it matter, what difference is it going to make? But the other thing that I think has really changed around getting buy-in for things is, I think talent and people, they used to come to a company with their bag of tricks, how they're used to doing things, and try to apply that into their new company. And I have really found that you need to be completely open to what may work in one company may not work in the next company. and what, some of your preconceived notions about things like performance feedback or, onboarding or how you track data, they may not work in this organization. And so I have found myself, being very open to any idea to solve problems that may be very different than what was successful for me in a past company, because the business is different, the culture is different. So I now have a super open mind about what can work and what can't. But I do need to see the data. I do need to understand how it's going to move the business forward. I do need to see that it has been tested within the business before I try to make a decision about spending money.
Okay. All right, let's shift towards careers a little bit, because I'm curious from an audience point of view, how many of you think that you might want to be a chief people officer at some point in your career? Okay, a good amount of hands. Let's help them. What is the best way that these attendees can prepare themselves for a path that could lead to a CPO role?
Cool. I jokingly said don't do it, but I will tell you, it's the best job I've ever had, but it's also the biggest pain in the ass. I mean, it's a hard job, and you have to love what you're putting in for very, very little back. That's like one of the main things. But here's, I'll give you the advice. This is actually how I interview. This is what I say on interviews for heads of people roles. CEOs will ask me, do you have experience doing salary bands or making a budget for headcount? And I said, look, at this level, any candidate you meet should have that experience. At this level, at the level of the chief people officer, they should have at least touched everything. Now, I have never been a recruiter in my career, but I've managed recruiters. I've been a hiring manager. So as long as I can talk to my recruiting staff about recruiting, then I think I can be effective. And in fact, that empowers them to be stronger, having a stronger point of view, because they're the subject matter experts. So what I tell CEOs is, if you're looking for someone to just check a bunch of boxes for you, you're playing a fool's game, because this CHR role is so broad. You are not going to find someone who's done 10 years recruiting, 10 years comp and ben, 10 years learning development, because they're going to be retiring in 2 years. I mean, it's not, that person isn't out there. But what you really need to find is someone who has a couple areas in which they have expertise and who knows how to find the talent that can be the experts. Former President Barack Obama said this. He said, I hire people, I make a habit of hiring people that are smarter than me. And my first reaction is, oh, that's so scary, because then they're going to take my job, but he didn't mean smarter than him, period. He meant smarter than me on national security, smarter than me on economy, because he is not the singular expert in any of those areas. So my advice to you guys is, become an expert in something, whether it's recruiting or something, and find that passion, but collaborate with other people on your team. Learn about benefits, because you're selling benefits to candidates. Learn about the employee experience. Learn about culture, just so that you have enough to be able to be a part of the conversation, so that even when you become the chief people officer, you know the kind of candidates you want to look for that are going to run benefits for you, or that are going to run L&D. So if you try to overextend yourself too wide, I don't think that you're going to be a meaty of enough candidate one day. So I say go deep, dabble in wide, and I think that you can be a really strong candidate for this role. One last thing is, you have to care about the business. And what I find amazing about my recruiters is they know more about these positions than the hiring managers do. Right, because they have to help them create the job description. They have to vet these things in candidates. And I feel like my people know more about supply chain, brand marketing, PR, finance. They know more about this company and how it runs than really any one given person. So I think knowing that business and understanding the business is also going to make you a super strong candidate for this role one day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Susan said. I think a couple of things have really helped me through my career, and I've been in HR and business partner and then manager up through it, but have also managed talent. But I think one of the most important traits that I look for in a good people leader is self-awareness, because as Susan spoke about, it is so broad. And I think a lot of reason why some CPOs or VPs and people don't succeed is because there's a complete misalignment with the CEO between the person and what they see the job as and what the CEO does, because nobody is a comp wizard and also amazing at organizational development, facilitation, training. Like, it's just, that doesn't really exist. And I think some leaders think that person is all in one, when it's actually probably 5 different roles. So I think, what Susan said is right on. Knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, and being able to augment it with the right people around you. And some of those might be external resources, a comp consultant, an equity consultant. And I think that is how people do it. They may not tell you that's how they're doing it, but I don't know anybody who knows everything about the function. The other thing I would say is what I found to be super useful as I've navigated my career is to have both a mentor or a supporter on the business side and on the HR side. So somebody who was a business leader that I'm very close to, who I'll go to and say, hey, what do you think about this situation, from a business perspective? Am I approaching it the right way? If I was going to have this difficult conversation with a business leader, can you, role play with me and let me know what I could do differently or do better? And that's been exceedingly helpful throughout my career as a mentor and a sponsor. And then the same on the people and talent side. Having people that I can call. It can be a lonely job as a CPO, because there's a lot of things that you can't talk about. Your main relationship is with the CEO, and you probably shouldn't go around saying bad things about your CEO, even though you're having a frustrating day sometimes. So it can be a really lonely job. So I highly recommend building a coalition externally around you that can not only mentor you, but give you feedback and also open doors for you.
And I just respond from a chief in general, from whether, whatever title you want to put on when you're joining the C-suite, is the importance of building a track record in how you develop people, because everyone in the C-suite, that's part of their role, and what kind of track record you've had in developing, allowing, helping people achieve, being a great mentor, helping people achieve things that they never dreamed possible in their career. How have you promoted people within your organization to other parts of the company? Really, how have you developed leaders under your area? And the other thing that's universal is also being able to cast a vision. And being able to sell your ideas and cast a vision for what the future could look like, and really how you've mastered that change management as part of casting that overall vision for whatever function you want to lead.
And get a dog. My dogs know all the company secrets. The only people I can tell.
All right, so I have one last question for all of you, and thanks so much for spending time with us and sharing your wisdom and your perspective. What is the best part of your job? And I want to start with you, Susan.
Well, it's never a boring day because people are fascinating. But I'll go back to why I got into HR. I think the best part of my job is I get to directly impact if people love coming to work or not every day. And I don't mean like Wednesday I loved it and Thursday I hated it, so now I failed my job. I just mean like creating an environment in where people can succeed, can put in the work and see some benefit to that. It's one of those few areas of work, and this is no bash on people who are financially minded, but finance, the numbers are the numbers. Like 5 is always going to be 5. It's never going to sometimes look like 8. It's just they're not going to change. But with people, They look different every day. They behave different a lot, and it's just it's super exciting to be able to figure out people and do what you can to make a positive impact. And that sounds super cheesy, but yeah, I think that's makes it all worth it.
Well, my favorite thing about my new job is being able to go into organizations because these are organizations that know they want a better culture, and it's going in and working generally starting with the CEO about what he or she is looking at for what the problem areas are within the company, and it's great to be able to take an outsider's perspective and look at a lot of different kinds of organizations and see some things they might be missing. And I'll give you an example. There was one company I worked with, and they wanted to test their culture, you know, how are our values, and we did lots of surveying and testing, and their employees loved the company. They were signed on about the values and the purpose of the organization. They were doing great. The company just didn't have a lot of mechanisms to keep reinforcing it. And so what I liked, that was an outside perspective to be able to help them really turn up the volume and amplify all the things that they were doing correctly. And they didn't need a course correction, they just needed mechanisms to be able to talk inside the organization more about what they'd done. So what I really love is being able to help organizations achieve a goal that they're looking for in terms of what their culture looks like and help them pinpoint some areas that they could really accentuate.
I think, you know, like Susan said, it is a hard job. I think it is a very hard job because you essentially have very little direct control, but need to be able to influence a huge amount of people. And that, you know, takes time and skill to get to that point. What I would say the best part of my job is when you do that effectively and you see how that can change the trajectory of the business, the trajectory of employees and leaders, and you see them succeed based on a program that your team put together or based on someone great that got brought in to the organization. And you know, you really can see, not as directly, you know, it's sometimes hard to quantify all the results that a great people and talent team achieve, but through the years, you know, I have seen so many people who have risen to high positions based on training they had or feedback that they received, and that to me is super gratifying, and it's why I continue to stay in the field.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us, and good luck with the rest of the conference. And please give a round of applause to the amazing panelists.
Thank you.